What is going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today I want to talk to you about Rezolve AI. They just put out their first half 2025 earnings, and I want to go over some of the good, bad, and ugly highlights that you need to be aware of. Aside from that, I want to go over some of the data points and what's really affecting it today. Before we get into any of that, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up, and with that, let's get right to it. So Rezolve, at the time of doing this video, is up 6.12%, so it is bouncing off of the intraday low of 494, 623 the high, and even during the pre-market did have a high of about 639. So the market really did initially like their earnings, and then you kind of had reality set in and it started to go a little bit lower. We are seeing a lot of volume though, so 81.03 million shares being traded, 22.9 is the average. So when it comes down to their earnings, this is some of the key highlights that they thought to bring forward. So 6.3 million in the first half for revenue. That is a 426% year-over-year growth. One thing that I don't understand is that why they are putting consensus. So I've done a lot of videos on Rezolve, and leading into their earnings, there was no estimates whatsoever. Like Rezolve is largely overlooked. So I don't really know where they're getting all these consensuses from. Even when it comes down to gross margins, was at 95.8, so pretty good stuff for that. But it goes to show 60 to 70% consensus. So I think they're just trying to make themselves look a little bit better, because their last earnings, I think it was like 91. I'll touch on that later in the video. So in general, I'm not really sure where they're getting that from. Adjusted EBITDA being at 17.7 million. That's not something to really bring up, let alone being your third point at all. So maybe it's a positive thing to them, but generally not that great. Last 6 months, so their last submission, they did grow from about 50 to 100 enterprise customers, and so they did get some major clients: H&M, Urban Outfitters, Ferrero, Liverpool, a lot of multi-million-dollar transactions, so definitely good for that. Partnerships with Microsoft and Google as well. When it comes down to it, they did also end the first half of 2025 with 230 million in cash and cash equivalents. Estimated about 91 million in convertible debt that they did quash. So definitely good for that. And then when it comes down to it, why they really did move higher today, especially first thing, was because of their guidance. So they did raise their 2025 ARR guidance, so annual revolving revenue. They raised it from 100 million to 150 million. So that was always a positive thing. And then 2026, they also did give a target of 500 million. So of course, yeah, that's exactly why everything just rocketed higher, because that is extremely positive. So in general, it is what it is. So let me know your viewpoint on that. They kind of did also allude to some M&A coming down the pipeline, clearly over the next 6 months or something along those lines. But when it comes down to some of the negatives, let's kind of talk about that, right? Because it can't just be one-sided. You have to look at everything. So their net loss was 57.8 million. Operating cash burn about 2.6 million a month, and that's despite the high gross margins. And so one thing that I kind of brought it up, so 2026 targets as well as 2025, I think generally that could be seen as a positive and as a negative. So 500 million in ARR for 2026, that would put them pretty much top 10 for growth companies like in 2026. That is like extremely ambitious. So in my opinion, I do feel that is actually one of the attributing factors why it started to go down, because people started to realize, hey, this would put them at X multiple, blah, 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 and just put them extremely expensive. Like, it's not a cheap stock. I know when Dan mentioned in a fireside chat that I think at $3 or $4 it was considered cheap. That's too high for targets, in my opinion. So ultimately, that is why it is going down a little bit. So you might see it as a positive, you might see it as a negative. So it's all down to interpretation. Even leading into their earnings, I mentioned that it's going to be largely trust. And do you believe in what the management is doing? Do you believe in the company? And then most recently, there was a short report by Fuzzy Panda or whatever, Fuzzy Peach, whatever the name was. And interestingly enough, Dan actually did address that first thing. I see that as a negative. I've never seen any company address a short report in their actual earnings, being especially let alone the first thing that you do bring up. So it's good that he brought it up, but technically it's just he said, she said, right? All he just said is, hey, I wish there was some legal way that we can go after them. There is. It's called suing them. You can easily sue them if you feel it is incorrect. And like, that's defamation easily. So when he said that, I instantly was like, okay, this guy either doesn't know like what defamation is or laws, or he actually, there might be some validity to that. So in general, him saying that, I don't know, it's kind of weird in my opinion. And even aside from that, near the end of the earnings, and I'm going to be completely honest, and hopefully you guys watch me because I am not here to pump you up and I'm not here to bring you down. I'm completely honest. And their earnings was very dry. It was very boring. And near the end, when a lot of analysts asked questions, Dan had to repeat, like, hey, what was your second question again? Like, his mind was not there. I don't know if it's just the time zone, if he is tired or whatever else, but it did not sound like he wanted to be there. So rather unfortunate in reality. At the same time, his mic had a little bit of a issue, had a echo in some cases. So in general, I think it just was amateur. It was a very amateur earnings. And for you to come out and say you're going to have 500 million in annual revolving revenue in 2026, you can't be amateur like this whatsoever. So in general, it is what it is. One thing I didn't like is one analyst asked about staffing, how many employees that he has in one actual department, and he kind of just mentioned, oh, I think around 250. Like, you should know all that stuff. Like, and generally speaking, 250 I don't feel like is that much. So at the end of the day, that's kind of the good bad highlights from their earnings. My apologies about earlier today. I was actually intending on live streaming it, but just this isn't the first time YouTube just doesn't allow me to connect my platform. So it was, unfortunately, I couldn't do that. So that's why I had to cancel the live stream, like I said, unfortunately. But aside from that, at the time of doing this video, shorts are returning about 59,000 shares. 9.33% of the free floats being shorted, works out to be 11.05 million shares. Looking at what shorts did so far, like early this morning, they were at one time increasing about 1.8 million. But given the amount of volume, I don't think that would have been that crazy of a situation that would have prompted all of this push lower. Aside from that, looking at the options, 5.4 million in calls, 620,000 in puts, 48% of all the options being done are bearish in nature. Most of that though is while it was going down. So again, it is what it is. From a bull standpoint, you see a consensus for it to be roughly around that 650 for the end of this week. So between 6 to 650. And in case you missed my last video, they did open weekly chains. So that's always good. Kind of goes to show that obviously Rezolve's getting on more and more people's radar. And again, that's something positive at least. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub between 4 and 450. So there is a little bit more downside anticipated from them. And like I said, the consensus is more bearish. These are all the transactions occurring on the secondary market above $100,000. And this is why I like to always bring up where volume is coming from. So algorithmic trading is the largest force today, because even looking here, you see basically about, 5 transactions that are sells, one for 128, 112, 115, 108, and then 106. The rest are buys. So big money is actually buying Rezolve as it dips. So it's not always as it seems. So because if people looked at this, they would assume that institutions are selling, but rather it is algorithmic trading. So again, something to keep in mind. These are all the transactions occurring on the dark pool. So dark pool is often enough used by shorts and hedge funds. So kind of quiet a little bit today. But aside from that though, with it at 529, it is trading between this S1 and this S2. So 508 and then 433 is going to be good support levels, and then 554, 629, and then 704 is going to be the next strong target slash resistance points. So if you really did like their earnings and you liked what you heard, just orient a lot of your buys towards kind of the support points. Again, if you're wanting to dollar cost average or whatever else. Aside from all that, there hasn't been any new analyst ratings yet, but potentially even after hours or maybe tomorrow, we could be seeing some new analyst ratings coming down the pipeline. But even looking at the flow right here, this is again signaling that algorithmic trading is very active. No real articles coming out associated to Rezolve, aside from just one, which is highlighting their obviously earnings. So it's kind of crazy. Just still, despite everything, Rezolve's not on a lot of people's radars. It is looking like it's recovering a little bit, but nonetheless though, still below that 10-day moving average, so signaling a little bit more of a pullback. One thing to take note of though that's different from yesterday is that you see a lot more willing buyers. So it's pretty much extending it all the way up to about 480 for the most part, so a lot of good buyers up until there. And then in general, there's that little bit of a small gap. So if Rezolve is able to really hit this wall of sellers, it could actually get to probably around that 570 again and settle somewhere around there. So at the end of the day, like I said, I brought you a lot of the highlights, good, bad, and the ugly. If they are, for whatever reason, able to hit those 2026 and even 2025 targets, that is deserving of a round of applause, because for them to increase their 2025 guidance by 50 million, that's definitely deserving of a round of applause. Again, if they can hit it. The bad thing about Rezolve is now we are in speculation mode. We have about 6 months until their next earnings. So let me know your general thoughts on Rezolve. Are you buying? Are you selling? Was there some other red flags from their earnings that you did not like? What was your kind of 2 cents from all that? One final thing, pop over to my Patreon if you are looking for some solid buy signals on stocks, options, crypto. So I put out daily day trades, numerous swing trades. Worthwhile to kind of pop over there and check that out. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.